Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to get us started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This is the Pathways to Programming Town Hall. It's an event about Assembly Bill 292. We have an amazing panel for you all tonight, so I'm really excited to get into the discussion. And I mean this when I say it. We are joined by some experts this evening, folks who've been doing this work for a very long time and have been studying this issue and can just provide us with a lot of the solutions to address a lot of these long-standing issues. Before we get into the program, I just want to clarify exactly what AB 292 is and just set the context for what we're going to discuss tonight. AB 292, what we are calling the Access to Programming Act, is a piece of legislation this year that is aiming to do a few things. Primarily, we're looking to remove a lot of the barriers that exist for folks in California prisons to be enrolling in programs. So these can look like extremely long wait lists or inflexible work schedules, or crucially over the past year, programming that is canceled during lockdowns, which has now been the case since the onset of the COVID pandemic almost about a year. AB 292 is also seeking to address some credits issues, specifically in terms of who can and cannot earn credits and at what levels within the California incarcerated population. So for us, this bill is a really important accountability measure. And it just guides CDCR to be offering these rehabilitative programs in a much more equitable way. So before I kick us off tonight and get into the panel, though, we are joined by the author of Assembly Bill 292, Assemblymember Mark Stone, who represents the 29th District in California, so parts of the Santa Cruz and Monterey area. So Assemblymember Mark Stone, thank you for being here this evening with us. I want to formally introduce you here and just ask you two questions. So one, if you can just briefly describe why AB 292 is important to you, right? And then also, why do you champion legislation like this? So please take the floor.
Sure, thank you, Greg. I'm very happy to be here tonight and just looking at some of the people who've come on this call, a lot of familiar faces. And I know a lot of folks who have been working on reforming the justice system for quite some time. So this is a bill, well, we know programming is about recidivism reduction and giving people a chance to address issues in their lives that need to be addressed. Hopefully, as they get out and move back into society, that they have the tools necessary to be productive, effective members in our community. Which means ultimately, it's about keeping communities safe and ensuring that people have all the benefits and abilities that they can have in order to be successful. And as we've seen over the years, the Department of Corrections and supposed to be rehabilitation has not always focused on the rehabilitation piece. So when we're talking about credits and programming, those are necessary parts of how the system was supposed to be designed, but we know it doesn't always function that way. So I've done a number of bills over the years, working with a lot of you here to try and get the system to function the way it is designed to function and give people who are on the inside really the opportunities that they need and that they deserve, and providing access to programming in a consistent and reasonable manner is what we're trying to accomplish. I've unfortunately had to do a number of bills because the system has proven not to be always that beneficial. It still wants to punish. And there are a lot of people, and even people in my chambers, in the legislature, who see that system as a system necessary to punish and make themselves, I guess, feel better one way or the other. And that's really antithetical to a modern society, and I think antithetical to what we strive for in our society and our community. So that's why I do bills like this, is to just help people. I have often done bills for populations who have no voice, and people on the inside often don't have a voice, and their loved ones don't have a voice. So if our systems are going to function, then we need to keep them under constant pressure to improve and to meet the standards set by our society. That's what this bill is about. It's yet another step in that direction. And I hope to continue with policies like this until we someday don't need to keep pushing on the system, because it will be as humane and rational as it can be. And I think we all know that's not coming probably anytime soon. So unfortunately, our work continues. So I want to thank you for the panel and thank you for everyone here. This is a bill that probably won't have a problem in the Public Safety Committee. We've done bills like this in the past and it should get out okay. But getting to the Assembly floor, when it gets to the Senate floor, your advocacy is very, very helpful in ensuring that legislators understand what this is about, understand the stakes, and are willing to help ensure that our systems function the way we want them to. So thank you. I appreciate being here.
Great. Thank you, Assemblymember Mark Stone. Again, he is the author of AB 292, what we are calling the Access to Programming Act. I'm going to transition us now into getting into our panel. We have 5 folks tonight who are going to field questions for us, but I have the honor of starting us off with introducing James King, the state campaigner for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. James truly is one of the sharpest and most brilliant minds in our movement, so it's an honor to work with him and to have him helping us push AB 292 forward. So James, the first question I want to ask you is really like a context question in terms of just helping us paint a picture, and for the audience here, what are some of these longstanding issues that the Assembly member had just mentioned, and what are we trying to correct with this bill, and what is the impact it could really have? We just appreciate if you can paint a picture for us tonight.
Thank you. And thank you to Assemblymember Stone for helping set the context for what we hope this bill will accomplish. California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation often creates bureaucratic hurdles that get in the way of people's effective self-help programming and reentry. One example of that is that there's a mechanism for your points to drop, for your security level to drop, and theoretically you move from a maximum security prison to a medium security prison and so on and so forth. But one of the things that winds up happening is this often is very disruptive to people's programming. And so one of the things that this bill accomplishes is it gives people autonomy, incarcerated people, the right to say, hey, I want to finish this program that I'm taking right now before we implement this transfer. Secondly, those types of transfers are called non-adverse transfers. But what we find often is that even non-adverse transfers have adverse effects. And one of those effects is that if your programming is disrupted, you're moved to a lower level institution or an institution closer to your home. When you get there, you have to get on waiting lists for self-help programming, which can be as much as 4 or 5 years long. As an example, when I arrived at San Quentin State Prison in 2013, I was placed on the Victim Offenders Education Group waiting list, VOGUE, which is a restorative justice type program. And in 2019, just as I was on the verge of going to the board, I was informed that my name had come up on the waiting list. So it took about 6 years. So that's a strong adverse effect for a person like myself who transferred because I had stayed out of trouble. What this bill will do is when you get to a new institution, you will be slotted into the waiting list at the same place you were at the previous institution. Third longstanding issue that this bill aims to address is the tension between institutional programming or institutional need and self-help programming. As an example, you can wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years to finally get into a program. And when you get into that program, and if it conflicts with your job assignment, then you can't take the program. Even if the parole board has told you you need to take the program in order to prepare for your reentry, currently a person's institutional job assignment, whether it be as a porter, dishwasher, working on yard crew, will trump any rehabilitative programming that a person tries to do. Those are a lot of the programming aspects that this bill addresses. The other thing that it addresses on the credit earning side is this. Right now, if a person is able-bodied, young, and meets the criteria and is willing to go risk their lives to fight fires, then they can earn a certain amount of time, they can earn a certain amount of credits off of their sentence. What this bill does is it creates equitable pathways so that people who are not able-bodied, maybe someone who has asthma, can still earn the same credit earning. Someone who does not meet the age category, someone who is not able-bodied, someone. In addition, there are right now 3 firefighting camps, I believe, for women out of the dozens that are available. So gender becomes less of a barrier for equitable credit earning. This bill creates equitable pathways for everyone, regardless of their age, their able-bodiedness, their gender, to be able to earn credits towards their release.
Great. Thank you, James. Appreciate that context as always. I'm going to pass it to my colleague Issa now to continue the panel.
Hey folks, yeah, Issa here, also from Ella Baker Center. Really excited to be here today with you all. And I actually have a question for another member of our panel, Phil, and also just hoping, Phil, if you would be able to walk us through what are some of the key elements of this legislation and kind of just break it down for us. No, that's a lot to put on your shoulders, but also just, yeah, maybe giving us some context of breaking down what the bill would do.
Yeah, no, it is not a lot to put on my shoulders based on everything James King just said. But I also too want to thank Assemblymember Stone. I see for championing this bill, but also too I see a constituent, Lori Brooks, saying that she's super grateful that you're her representative. So I just wanted to put that out there from the chat. But yeah, as James said, like I second every single part of that. He hit the nail on the head. He knocked it out the park. As far as key elements, I would say that. I'm happy that we're going to have access to programming that's not in person. Well, I mean, I wish it was all not in prison and we could do it all out here. But programming that will be offered that is not in person, because right now the CDCR does not have a structure in place to let that happen. Currently, people are doing book reports to prepare for the parole board. People are receiving packets from organizations that normally would be able to provide programming. And they're filling out their packets and they're doing what they can, and they're getting memos saying that these programs that you're doing in your cell, these in-cell programs, they're not going to count to your sentence reductions that they normally would be able to achieve through the RAC credits, the rehabilitative achievement credits. And so people aren't earning time off as much as they could, so they're serving more time than they should, which is contributing to sustaining mass incarceration. And we all know that is a huge public safety issue, especially within this last year with COVID and the call for mass releases and not utilizing every single tool in your toolbox is just sustaining that. And that's not just a public health issue inside a prison. This also affects the correctional staff, and their homes and their communities. So implementing this non-in-person programming is going to be key in helping that. And lastly, I just want to say that this will keep folks that are incarcerated in need of rehabilitative structures. It'll keep them in a positive environment. These programs I've seen, they create entire different cultures within prisons. They give people the tools to unpack trauma, and people who are walking around with less trauma are less inclined to be involved in prison politics, prison violence, any of that negative stuff that you see on TV. And so that's one positive impact, but then that also translates to a safer entry. So for those folks that come home, they've done the work on themselves, healed their traumas, and really met their own needs. They're not going to come home with those same needs to cause harm or trauma in the community. And so that, I would say, is a huge plus when it comes to public safety. So I mean, this bill for me, it's just makes sense to do it. It's beneficial all the way around. And I don't know what was next, but
No, yeah, thanks so much, Phil. I think we were going to go into hearing from some folks currently incarcerated about what their experience has been over the past year. As folks know, since March of 2020, there has been no in-person programming, and so many folks of our loved ones on this call, I'm seeing just from everything going on in the chat as well. We know that there's not been a lot of those connections or contact visits. And so wanted to hear from some folks inside about what that experience has been for them too. So I'll just share my screen if that's okay. And I don't know, Greg, if you wanted to talk a little bit about our first person who's going to be, who we're going to be hearing from, David Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Isa. The first currently incarcerated individual we have a recording from, his name is David Cruz. He is a senior inside organizer for Initiate Justice. Initiate Justice has a lot of work we do on the inside with folks, and we have members, and then we have like a hierarchy that goes above that with organizers. And senior inside organizers is the highest position, I guess you can say, that we offer to folks who are currently incarcerated. And Mr. Cruz is that person for us. I mean, he is truly a leader amongst leaders. He's very enthusiastic about AB292, and I was able to record a message from him that he wanted me to share with you all today. So that's exactly what we're going to get into now.
I've served about 13 years. I can tell you that my name is David Leamse Cruz, CDCR AG0361, and I am senior organizer for Initiate Justice Facility. I've served about 13 years. I can tell you that for me and people like me in the incarcerated community, this bill will prevent disrupting of the program. That means that we continue to have rehabilitation regardless of what happens. Just because you have a violent case doesn't necessarily mean that you are a continuous person that you can never change. Rehabilitation itself negates that concept of nobody can change. Otherwise, it would be impossible to rehabilitate people. So if a person inside a prison system has done all of these things that are positive, then why are they still being judged as being violent where there is no evidence, there is no nexus they have continuing that way of life? This bill creates the possibility of earning greater time off, just like camp facilities have, where greater job, greater responsibility would equal greater opportunities to get released, which also increases the quality. It's so hard to get into GED classes in here and things of that nature. They are supposed to be rehabilitative for us. I can say this, it not only takes a lot of years to get in, but anything can kick you out and then you go back into the list. Like, I give you a real example. Last month, I went to quarantine. For 21 days, I was unassigned to my vocation. And they told me, oh, you're back in the waiting list. Well, I waited almost a whole year to get into this class, and I was almost done. Now I have to start all over whenever that opportunity comes. So this bill will help us out to be able to be placed in priority regardless and not lose our opportunity. We have to better that system, and it's so hard right now. So any bill that can be passed and anything that can help out so that it's more effective, we need that.
Yeah, thanks so much for introducing Mr. Cruz for us, Greg, and we're gonna hear from one more person who's currently incarcerated. I wanted to see if James wanted to introduce him, given what you've done with this program and your relationship with Tan, or Mr. Tran.
Mr. Tan Tran, the amazing Tan Tran.
That's right.
Speaker. Tan Tran is the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights' first ever Inside Fellow. This year, we've been very fortunate to start an Inside Outside Fellowship. Isa Bella Borgeson, who is one of our moderators today, is the Outside Fellow. And it just means that Tan's a full member of our policy team this year and has been helping us as we shape this legislation and in our co-sponsoring efforts. For the recording level on this one is really a little low. So I encourage everyone, turn your computers, your laptops, your phones up And let's hear from Ty.
Not having access to programs during this pandemic has harmed us tremendously on the inside. There's two situations burned into my memory during this lockdown that I can't forget. And the first one was around June 2020. We've been on 23 or 24-hour lockdown for months. And we were allowed out the cell about once or twice a week to shower and then lock it right back into our cells. And I remember it was during this time, in the middle of the day, someone just started shrieking, "Air! I just want some air. Let me out of this cell. I just need some air." And I will grow old and remember the sound of that man screaming until he couldn't scream no more. And that was nearly 9 months ago, and we're still on 23 to 24-hour lockdown. And the second memory seared into my mind is the first day we finally got yard after months of being confined to the cell. I remember stepping outside the cell block for the first time in months, and it was weird. It was like looking at meerkats on a prairie. Everybody was standing stock still, looking up. So I looked up too. I was like, what's going on? I was wondering what everybody was looking at, and then I saw it. And it was the sky. And it was blue, and it was beautiful. And it dawned on me that we haven't seen the sky in months. And when I looked back down, I could see it in all of the people's faces. This pandemic didn't just damage our physical health. It damaged our mental health. And these tragedies take flaws that already exist and amplify them. So I just want to say that extended lockdowns without showers, yard, or access to programs, these are commonplace in prison. We must prioritize programs and not lockdowns if we want healed, healthy, and rehabilitated human beings re-entering society. Because the way things are ran now, we incarcerate hurt humans and further damage them by making programs inaccessible. This is more than just a matter of making prisons a more rehabilitative place. This is about what type of neighbors do we want returning home to us when they're released. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey folks, yeah, I really appreciate everyone on the call for just taking the time to listen to both Mr. Cruz and also to Tan, and just really thankful for the words that they shared and reminding us what's at stake for so many of our loved ones inside, so many of our community members and organizers inside, and that access to programming, like both Tan and Mr. Cruz has said, that it's essential to our community members inside, and it's essential not just for in so many different ways that they laid out. So want to pass it to Greg to push us forward on the next part of this panel, and just invite folks to take care of themselves and do whatever you need after all that you just heard too.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I'm really glad that we were able to get those recordings and to bring that into this conversation, because when we are talking about AB292, these are the folks who would be benefiting. So we need to prioritize them and put them at the center of our efforts. The next question for our panel is going to go to Mr. Kenneth Hartman, the Advocacy Director with TPW. Ken, I want to ask you another, a similar like context question. When we say that, programming can be suspended during lockdowns, and programming is something that can sometimes just go away at the whims of the institution or of administrative officials, what does that really mean, right? Like, can you just peel that back for us and just explain what's the impact of that on the population?
Sure. Thank you, Greg. And I will echo everyone else. Assemblymember Stone, thank you so much for pursuing this bill. This is really important. It's going to help a whole lot of folks. And Greg, I think just to follow up with Mr. Tran, the last person who spoke from inside on the phone, this is about who we're going to have get out of prison at the end of the day. And the kind of thing that is saved and protected by AB 292 is access to the kind of programming that helps folks inside become their better selves, become their best selves. So when they get out, they make a good neighbor, they make a good citizen, they make someone who gets out and lives a good, meaningful life. At the end of the day, those are our loved ones. I was in prison for 38 years. I've been out about 3 years now. I was very lucky to be on a yard that was pretty program heavy, but even on that yard, there were lockdowns all the time for no reason. Sometimes the lockdowns happened because not enough staff showed up that day. They decide they're going to have training this day. Maybe they have a party they're going to have because it's a holiday and they want to have a banquet together. And all of these things disrupt the rehabilitative process. And I think, look, and at the end of the day, what does that really mean? That means if you're disrupting the rehabilitative process, you're making it harder for people to become their better self, to be able to get out and be that good neighbor. When you disrupt the rehabilitative process, it harms all the things that we're trying to do so that when human beings who are stuck in an incredibly traumatic experience are able to rise above what they live in. And what they live in, as you know, I thought it was really good to hear those phone calls from inside prison. You could hear those noises, the clanking, the yelling, the doors slamming. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your whole life. That's the reality that you're living in. You're living in an extraordinarily harmful, damaging experience, something that needs to be radically changed. In the interim, though, we have human beings living inside of prisons. And what do we want to do? We want to help these people become better people. I'm one of those people, and I know what it's like to be inside of there. What has the last year been like? And I've spoke to many of my friends, people that I care about and love. So I've lost people who've died in the pandemic. But what are the things that I've heard? It's been extremely depressing. It has been really, really depressing. One of the reasons it's been depressing, people are not able to participate in these programs with people coming in from the outside who tell people inside prison a message that they don't hear from the prison system. You are a fellow human being. That's what these programs, fundamentally, what are they really telling people inside? You are a fellow human being. And that's the most important message that any human being needs to hear. And the prison system doesn't tell you that. The prison system tells you you're not really a human being at all. And that's a huge problem, right? And this is why people are so damaged by what's going on inside. What is the other thing is people have been extremely frustrated. They've been extremely frustrated. I totally understand the guy just screaming out of his cell, please, I just need some air. I know what it's like to be locked inside of a concrete box with no access to the outside for a long period of time. People have been inside, have been dealing with this now for over a year. This is a long time to have nothing, to be basically deprived of everything, right? And what has it also done? It's been extremely frightening. People outside are scared, right? We're frightened. We're able to have 6 feet of space. We're able to stay away from people. We're able to buy masks and wear them when we need to wear them. People in prison didn't get masks for a long time. It took a big battle by many of the people who are also providing these programs to organize and get masks sent into people, right? And there is no 6 feet of space inside of a prison. It's impossible. If you're in a cell with someone, you're a foot away from them. And that's just it. That's the end of the story. So it's been extremely frightening too, right? And I think the last thing I'll say, because I don't want to take too much time, but I think also underlying all of this, as it's been mentioned a couple of times, it has deprived people of the ability to earn good conduct credits through rehabilitative achievement credits, right? Which takes time off a person's sentence, which was passed by the voters of California in Prop 57, right? And what does that mean? It means that at that time when we have to get as many people out of prison as quickly as we possibly can, it is keeping people to do more time in prison. So this pandemic has resulted in people serving more time in prison, which I can't imagine a worse thing to happen. So basically, you're going to do more time in prison during a time when more people are dying in prison than anywhere else in this country, except for retirement homes. Prisons are the second most dangerous place to be in this pandemic. So what has the last year been? It's been really, really traumatic. And we need to get these programs back inside to help people to deal with the trauma they've experienced for the past year.
Yes. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate all that context. I have one more question for a panel member, and then I know there's some questions in the chat, and I'll be able to get to those, and we'll kick those questions back to our panelists. But I want to introduce our next panelist, Ayla Benjamin, Executive Director of the Boundless Freedoms Project. Ayla, well, first, can you introduce what Boundless Freedom does? And from the program provider perspective, what is your role and what type of programs do you all offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Boundless Freedom Project brings meditation, mindfulness, movement programs, and Buddhist services into the California prisons. And we do a lot of what Ken was just talking about, reaffirming people's humanity, providing tools that are useful for trying to cope while living inside of the prisons. We form communities, and we also have support for folks once they get out. So we try and maintain this whole continuum of care for supporting the folks inside.
Yes, thank you, Ayla. And so I guess similar question I just asked Ken, from the program provider's perspective and for other community-based organizations, this last year with obviously not being able to go into the prisons, I mean, obviously that seems very challenging, right? So just what are some of these challenges, and have there been any successes, or what does that look like? And maybe with 292, it seems that there could be some solutions for you to implement going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So this last year, for everybody has been extremely challenging. But one of the things in terms of program providers we are seeing is that there are opportunities that are arising in spite of this lockdown. Many organizations have pivoted their in-person programming to be mail correspondence. We've heard some success stories from few organizations who have been able to do remote programming via Zoom or other distance learning technologies. So there is some things that are happening, and AB292 would greatly expand that for all programs. So, as Ken and others were saying, lockdowns are very prevalent. This happens and disrupts programs all the time. Another thing that is very common, we known for many program providers, is there's a huge inequity in terms of which facilities are programming, which facilities have volunteers heading to them, where programs are. And AB292 would greatly expand that so that programs would be able to reach these more remote places where it's a lot harder to get volunteers to go in person. So ideally for programs, we'd be able to use AB292 for a blended approach to programming, where we can start to reach folks who we haven't otherwise been able to reach. And another positive thing that's actually started to emerge from this time is that some of the infrastructure for doing this type of distance programming is starting to emerge. So I already talked about there's mail correspondence going on. Just this week, the CDCR announced that tablets will be going out to every individual in the state of California's prison system by March 22. There's, again, more technology, more distance learning. There's lots of stuff happening that will support this already inside. And many of the organizations have been priming themselves to be ready to provide programs remotely. Another thing that this helps do for programs is it provides a certain measure of certainty for who we can reach in planning for growth of our programs, which is incredibly important, especially considering that many program providers have taken on the initiative of hiring folks who are system impacted and bringing folks in to work with their organizations. So actually this long-sighted view for programs is very important because it helps with the organization's sustainability, which therefore also impacts the, our continuum of care for all of our system impacted folks. I had the pleasure and privilege of being part of watching Ken and Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore yesterday. And in that call, she said that where life is precious, life is precious. And I think that's kind of fundamentally at the heart of it for program providers and all of our folks inside. It shouldn't matter if you are in a remote prison, people should still be able to access these programs. They should still be able to access program providers. We want this connection, and so many of our organizations are ready to expand our programming to meet the needs.
Great. Thank you, Ayla. Definitely appreciate that. See, Ken, you're in the chat right now. I was about to ask that question. I believe there was a question about the tablets. So Ken, do you want to take that and speak a little bit more to that, the new thing that's going to be rolled out?
I can, and I can tell you what they're telling us, and I know Ayla is aware of this too, because we both work with the TPW, different capacities, but the way we've been told is the tablets will be given to every single person inside of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation for free. And they're according to them, they will have this completed by the end of 2021. Feels a little optimistic to me, but I hope they're right. And that the tablets will be equipped to provide educational programs and other things like that, which will all be provided free. The tablets are being purchased from a private prison company. That's one of the things we don't like about it, but they are being provided free to everyone inside. They also have said they're going to lower the cost of phone calls and stuff too. So I think this is all connected with Geo. So, you know, that's all I can say, but they are supposedly free to the best of my knowledge. And they're starting at Valley State Prison is where they're going to begin the rollout of them. And I think it's supposed to happen this month.
Great, thank you, Ken. I'm seeing the next question here from Heidi is, will AB292 apply at all to California county jails? So the answer is no, right? This is a bill that's focused on CDCR in programs that are not available currently and are not available in an equitable way within the California state prison population. So this bill is really focused at CDCR, but I do agree that's a very important thing and we cannot be comments behind. Do any of the other panelists want to speak to the issue of programming or credits in the California county jails and how that relates or doesn't relate to what we're trying to do with AB292?
I would say that it's, you know, sad that we don't have that reach into the county jails, and there's a lot of reasons. There's turnover. There are people being released, you know, at higher rates. There's not a lot of long-term access. But yeah, I'm just glad that they brought that up because sadly, you know, in all of our advocacy, we kind of do leave out the conditions in county jails. And for me, I would just say that, you know, if I had access to programming, if I had, you know, I mean, I had a lot going on with trial and everything too, but if I had some kind of, you know, support network, some way to relieve stress, that would be something to think about. And I think, you know, just in our advocacy work, take that and we can, you know, making sure that we're not leaving anybody behind and make sure our efforts are more well-rounded. So I just want to thank that person.
Greg, I'd like to add to that too, that in light of the realignments, there are a lot of people now doing a lot more time in the county jails than there used to be. Some people are now doing like multiple years inside the county jail. So I really think that is an important thing to think about down the road.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing some questions here that I will definitely get to before we wrap up today, but I'm just wondering if there's any specific questions on AB292 and the legislation itself. So questions about what it is, what it isn't. I just want to make sure we're addressing the specific questions before we get into some other things here about individuals and the tablets and things like that. So if in the chat, if you do have a specific question about AB292, please list it there. Maybe in the meantime, while I'm looking for those questions to come up, I'll talk about ways to, Ginny read my mind. How can we support AB292 right now? That's what I was going to say. Amazing question. So as Assemblymember Mark Stone had mentioned at the beginning of this call, we anticipate the most opposition and blowback coming when we go to the Assembly floor, right? And then on the Senate floor. In a rough timeline, that may be around May or late May, kind of hard to know. But in the meantime, what you can do is start building really solid relationships with your legislators, because at the end of the day, the people in Sacramento are working for you, right? And they are accountable to your values. And so, you know, we'll send out action items saying, hey, you know, please call your legislator, tell them to support AB292, or hey, you know, fill out this template letter of support and send it to the office, which are, of course, very important action items. But if they're getting this letter and they're hearing from their constituent for the first time, it may have more weight to say, oh, wow, like this letter is from Phil. I know Phil. I know what his values are. In that, in supporting all of your advocacy efforts, I think it's just incredibly valuable that if you can get on a first name basis with your legislator, and if the offices can know about you, it'll make it a lot easier when it does come time to reach out and to support. So for individuals, I would say look out for action items and send them your way, which will probably be maybe starting later this month through April, May, and then throughout the summer. Also for organizations, just a quick plug, if you are part of an organization or a nonprofit, you have the ability to submit a position letter through an advocacy portal. So I know TPW and other folks here have been sending out those action items to organizations, but it's a way to get a letter submitted to the Assembly Public Safety Committee and to other committees to get registered as formal support for the bill, which shows up in the committee analysis, which can often be really valuable, right? Because they say, oh, this is AB 292. Well, nobody submitted a letter of support. Is this an important bill? Versus they type up the analysis for AB 292 and there's 10 pages long of organizations that are supporting it. It's going to show that the community is really behind this bill. So I would say for organizations, we can definitely plug for you all and make it really simple in terms of filling out the template letter of support. It's all you got to do is just throw your logo head on top of the letter. We'll send you the instructions for how to submit it through this advocacy portal. But that makes a huge difference also, especially if your organization has relationships with various legislators. Say, oh, wow, look, this is Boundless Freedom Project. They're thinking this is a good bill. I'm going to consider this pretty significantly now. We're going to need everybody coming together to help us push this bill and just all of our efforts in general. But the action items for organizations are a little bit different. And like I said, we will, oh, thank you, Jane. Jane's putting the portal there. I will admit, I don't think the portal is like that user-friendly. So if you have issues that come up with submitting the letter, please, of course, reach out to us and I'll put all of our emails in the chat. There should not be barriers for participating in the democracy, but there are, and they can make that a lot easier. But we can walk folks through that. We need those letters as soon as possible. So when you get off this call, if you can do it tomorrow or by the end of the week, that would be really, really important for us. I've seen a bunch of things come through the chat now while I speak. Oh, Phil, please hop in.
No, I was going to ask you. So I see people asking for a template letter. I know there's those whole find my legislative member links. Are those going to be readily available? And if so, where can folks find those?
Yeah, definitely. So everybody who's on this Zoom, we have your email information. So we're going to send a follow-up email with the recording of this. And we'll also clarify all these steps for you, right? So if you don't know who your state senator is or your state assembly member, we'll send all these helpful things, to Phil's point, so that we can make it as easy as possible for you all, because I know everyone's very busy and things like this, and we appreciate all the support we can get. I don't believe that any support is insignificant. So if you're just making one call or if you're just sending one letter, you're participating in helping us pass AB 292. And I would love for everybody to feel like they're having a stake in this legislation and helping us push it this year. That's great. There was another question here from Desiree. If I'm hearing correctly, AB 292 will make programming more accessible regardless of which prison they're located in. So like a level 2 versus a level 4. James or Phil or somebody else, do you want to take that one?
The short answer is yes. It will make programming more accessible and also like create more diverse forms of programming or formalize and acknowledge more diverse forms of programming. Many people on level 4s are, doing their own self-education. They're reading books, writing book reports. Also, one other thing that this bill does that we haven't highlighted a lot, but it's really important, is there's rehabilitative value in working. So this bill allows people who are, say, working clerical jobs or working jobs where they're learning certain skills to receive educational milestones for that as well. Basically, what this bill aims to do is reflect whatever the person's programming is and the rehabilitative aspects of that programming. I know people at various prisons who have involved in sports leagues, and that was very rehabilitative for them. Arts and programming, which is something Ken brought up earlier this week, that can be hugely, hugely rehabilitative and help people process the pain and trauma and everything else of prison that Ton and Mr. Cruz highlighted earlier. So this bill formalizes and gives CDCR direction on how to reward or incentivize what's already happening.
Great, thank you, James. A couple more questions here, and then I do want to keep an eye on time. We will be wrapping up shortly. There's a question from Beth. Can you explain how this bill would help change the policy that prohibits someone from working in programming? So if folks can speak to that conflict that exists, again, anyone on the panel, please.
I saw that. I'll jump back in really quickly. The right now, as I named earlier, if a person has a job assignment and it conflicts with a self-help group that they would like to take, then they're barred from taking that program. What this bill would do is direct CDCR to use their database that they use to track who's where at what time to give them more flexibility. So a person can, there's a time mechanism that they used to have. I forget what it's called. It's some CDCR acronym. They used to say, well, you can check out of work to go do such and such. That's been lost since Prop 57 and since they became a little bit more technologically advanced. This aims to bring that back so a person can choose to either prioritize their self-help programming by not working or find times to go away from work to engage in the self-help programming and come back to work. Basically, it's meant to give the incarcerated person autonomy.
Great, thank you, James. Couple more questions, and then I'm gonna try to wrap us up. Couple questions here about incarcerated folks being able to submit these letters of support. So the answer is yes, right? We need letters of support from everybody, you know? I think the easiest way to do that would be for your loved one to either be a member of Initiate Justice or the Ella Baker Center so that they can receive it directly from our organizations. I know both of our orgs are being very intentional about sending in these template letter of supports, the same ones that we're providing for you here on this call to the folks who are incarcerated now, with very clear instructions saying, hey, this is AB292. I support it for these reasons, and it gives them the address of where to send it to in the state capitol, or excuse me, send it back to us with our organizations, and then we take care of making sure it gets submitted into the formal public record. So I would say after this email, please get in touch with myself or James or Issa or somebody else to get your loved one signed up to hear from our organizations directly. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you can just send us an email and we can just send you the template letter that exists that we're sending inside, and you can send it directly. So if you maybe want to get it to your loved one sooner than we could provide, or for whatever reason, we can definitely get that information to your loved ones. And I would just give a plug to both IJ and EBC with our mailing list. You definitely want to have your loved ones on that to receive all of the great information. Crispy question here, can we submit letters of support as an individual? So yeah, the answer there is yes. The plug I gave for organizations is because that sometimes gets weighted more heavily with the committee members and sort of behind the scenes, but individuals are also encouraged to do so. The template we created is one that is shared for organizations. So at the top, you can just erase that part that says put org logo head here, fill out the letter yourself and customize it and say, hey, my name is Crispy. I support this bill. I'm involved with EBC, with Restore Justice, with Initiate Justice, with these organizations. And for all these reasons, I support this bill, and then submit it through the same portal. It's really important, though, that if you are going to be submitting the letter through the portal as an individual, that you follow the steps closely that says that you are submitting it as an individual and not on behalf of an organization, because that would disallow Initiate Justice or EBC or somebody else from then going through and doing so on behalf of our organizations. So you can definitely do it. You have to follow a couple more steps, but I'm happy to follow up with you offline, Crispy, and outline all of those. Okay, let's see, a couple more questions here. How do we get our loved ones on your organizational list? I'll answer that again. We'll send out an email afterward. We'll clarify these things, make it super simple for you all. Get involved with all of our organizations. We all do amazing work to end mass incarceration in California. All right, y'all. I'm going to kick it to the panel to maybe say some closing words, and then I'm just going to close this out. But please, Ken, Phil, Ayla, James, anything you want people to know about this bill and why it's important and why we just need to all come together to really help champion this piece of legislation this year.
I'm always trying to be mindful of taking up too much space, and so I will step back for this one and let somebody else go.
I'll just reiterate how important programming is for everybody, for people who are inside, for families, for our communities, and how important it is for these tools to be accessible to people and to be able to have that connection to our community, and that this bill directly supports that. So everything we can do in our power to push this through will benefit all of us.
Yep. And as a person who has taken numerous programs and reaping the benefits of them out here in the community, I was, put in some stressful situations since I've been home, and I have just walked through them with as much with almost zero stress, and take it all in stride. So they're helpful on the outside too. And one thing that has popped up today, and me being happy for programming that is not in person, I think there's a few things that can be scary for that, and that's ending in-person programming. That's not what we're going to allow at all. We are very mindful of the tactics and nefariousness of the CDCR, and so we will be monitoring that to make sure that that does not happen. And the other thing on the flip side of that is, I will say that the CDCR leaves you with crumbs and makes you grateful for little things. And so for a person to be, since I've seen the free world, people are just on their phones all day, every day. And so like they don't have that access in there like that. And for those that don't know technology, they will be able to learn. It took me some time to learn. I learned a little inside, but I learned a lot more out here as far as technology goes. So there's a lot of benefits there too. And the other thing too, when I talk about those crumbs, people will see that, okay, hey, I'm taking this program with, this person from the outside, and I'm having a video call with my loved one. And that's not a visit. And that's the other thing too, that we always talk about. Those video calls aren't visits. And I heard somebody say something about video visits, maybe in the chat. And so for having this whole year of lockdown, for having nothing, and now you get a video call, that's not a visit. It's not, Ken is not here in my home with me. James, I'm not visiting with James right now. That's not a visit. And there's nothing to replace that. And so I just want to always be mindful of just those little tactics that make us grateful for crumbs and when we should be getting a whole lot more. And that's, some thoughts.
I'll go next and let James bring it home. I guess I would just reemphasize again, and to me, this is like a theme that I think is really important to remember. The kind of programs that we're talking about help people feel like human beings. And every single day that you're in prison, you are told word and deed that you are not a human being. And that's why these programs are so important. That's why these programs need to be supported. And that's why AB292 needs to pass, because it gives these programs more strength, more durability, and more ability to withstand the CDCR resisting them, because they're going to continue to do that. That's what they do. So we need more laws like this to compel the CDCR to create a space where human beings can be treated like human beings. So there it is. And I'll let James finish it up.
Thank you. It's all been said so well and wonderfully by everyone on the panel, even going back to Assembly Member Stone, Issa, David, and Tan. I guess the one thing that I would add is, we're all very familiar. We see it all of the time, capital C, capital D, capital C, lowercase r. And we're grudging about adding that R, because we know that first and foremost, corrections and rehabilitation are mutually exclusive. And so far, CDCR has a culture among its staff that prioritizes corrections at the expense of rehabilitation, always. Corrections will always trump our loved ones' mental health, our loved ones' emotional health. And I, for one, am very moved by what Tan said. When we asked him to talk about programming, instead he talked about getting a shower and seeing the sunshine. The emotional toll that has been taken upon our loved ones, that has gone on our loved ones for the last year, on top of the violence they've been experiencing for their entire incarceration, is a testament to the resilience of humanity. And what this bill, we are very hopeful that this bill does, is help start a shift in culture within CDCR to prioritize the humanity and just common dignity of our loved ones who are working very hard to get home.
Great. Thank you, James. Thank you all. This has been a really, really great event. I think I feel confident in saying this is maybe the first of many, right? Maybe we'll have more town halls later in the year, and there will always be opportunities to plug in to help us support this legislation. I want to give a shout out to the co-sponsors of AB292, Restore Justice, Ella Baker Center, and the TPW, along with Initiate Justice. I will make sure everybody who's on this call gets the recording and all the documents that we mentioned. I appreciate everybody's support, and please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a good evening.